Straight ahead, whatever it takes, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick describes Texas's efforts to help the Trump administration secure the southern border. But not every lawmaker is on board with the state's new actions. One step closer, the Lieutenant Governor tells us the controversial bill to spend your tax dollars sending students to private schools will pass the state Senate by Wednesday of this week. Why he insists it won't hurt public schools. And more relief. The Lieutenant Governor tells us how he wants to cut your school property taxes further and who he blames for any increases. Good Sunday morning to you. I'm Jack Fink. Get your fix for Texas politics. Eye on Politics starts right now. Hello and welcome to Eye on Politics and happy Groundhog Day. We begin with the new multiple actions Texas leaders have taken to help President Trump secure the southern border. Governor Greg Abbott deployed more than 400 additional Texas National Guard troops to the Rio Grande Valley, along with C-130 aircraft and Chinook helicopters, to join the thousands of Guard members already there. The governor also directed the Texas Department of Public Safety to deploy tactical strike teams to work with U.S. Homeland Security operations to track down and arrest more than 5,000 criminals with active warrants across the state who are in the U.S. illegally. Abbott issued a total of 5 executive orders involving the border. They include directing state agencies to help the feds deploy additional border barriers, share intelligence with the feds about foreign terrorist organizations such as Mexican cartels and the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, and identify all Texas land and facilities that could be used by the feds to detain and deport migrants. The state's actions come days after the Pentagon sent 1,500 U.S. troops to El Paso and San Diego to help the Border Patrol. The military is already deporting migrants on military aircraft. In El Paso, a flight carrying 80 people, including children, left Biggs Field at Fort Bliss heading to Guatemala City.
She said quit! She said quit!
The illegal immigration crackdown sparked protests by dozens of people in Dallas and Fort Worth 1 week ago. They criticized the president's policies and spoke about the fear gripping their families.
For my family, I love them, and I know they would be here if they could, but I'm just here to spread awareness of what's going on with ICE, the raids. They need to stop.
My family is scared. Everyone that I know is terrified to go out like to ice cream, to Walmart. They're just terrified, and that shouldn't be happening.
In Fort Worth, across from Northside High School, Democratic Congressman Marc Veasey set up a table to explain to people their rights in case family members are detained by ICE. He criticized the Trump policy.
But he's trying to play a game and scare people. And so what I'm urging people to do is, A, know your rights, but then asking the president, instead of playing these stupid, ignorant games, bring Democrats and Republicans together and let's come up with a real solution with this and not this made-for-TV crap.
We spoke with Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick at the Texas Capitol last week about the state's efforts to help the Trump administration secure the border.
Many of them were serious felons, criminals, gang members, potential terrorists, because we know we apprehended, terrorists in the last 4 years of Biden. So we need to round all of those up that we can find. And it would be no different, Jack, than if you had a crime wave in Dallas or Fort Worth. You would expect the police department and the state to help to focus on that crime wave and bring those people to justice. So that's what we're doing. And there are 1,000 of them all over the country. In Texas, as you know, we've invested a lot of money, 8 to 10 to 12 billion, depending how far you go back, to really protect Texas, but also protecting America. And so now we finally have a partner in the White House.
Lieutenant Governor, what other programs should Texans expect to see as all this plays out?
Whatever it takes on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis. We are determined to secure the border with President Trump. We're determined to stop terrorists from coming into this country and apprehend those who are on the terrorist watch list that the Biden administration didn't do. We are determined to round up the gang members and the criminals, the rapists, the child sex offenders, the murderers. We're determined to do it. And whatever it takes, Jack, this is a I don't think the public totally has their arms around how many people in this country have crossed the border in the last 4 years. Is it 10 million? Is it 11, 12? We think it's higher because remember when they give you the numbers, that's the numbers that they actually had an encounter with someone. But the thousands across the border in Texas that we didn't even see, besides the ones we did see and got away. Remember, our border, Jack, with Mexico is longer than the distance from Atlanta, Georgia to Maine. Now, it's not a straight line, but we have over 1,200 miles of border with Mexico. We don't have someone every eighth of a mile.
We saw protests in Dallas and Fort Worth over the weekend. People say they are scared. And what do you say to them?
I don't say anything to them. Were they out there having a rally for Laken Riley, who was killed, or Jocelyn Nungaray, who was a 12-year-old girl tortured and under a bridge and raped for 2 hours and thrown in the river by illegal immigrants? Where were they then? You know, look, if a country doesn't have a border, you don't have a country. And we haven't even talked about the 100,000 deaths and more from fentanyl that's coming into this country.
Wanted to ask you about Governor Abbott's request to get reimbursed by Congress for the $11 billion that the state has spent. You talked to President Trump. Have you mentioned this to him, and what is his reaction?
Well, I mentioned it to him in McAllen, Texas in 2017. So we go a ways back on that. And I believe if the president could write the check, he'd write the check. And at the time, it was when he couldn't get any funding for the wall. And I said, you know, Mr. President, we'll send you a bill for everything we've spent up to that time. And if you pay us, then we can build the wall, and then you can pay us for the wall. So if you can't get the money from Congress. So I hope Congress, they should reimburse us, because we've been defending America when we shouldn't have had to spend your viewers' taxpayer dollars. But it's up to Congress to do that. And
it's all controlled by Republicans.
Well, let's hope it happens. We're going to sure push for it, for sure. I know Senator Cornyn, Senator Cruz, and our Congress delegation, congressional delegation, are going to work on it too.
We also spoke with two state lawmakers, Republican Senator Bob Hall, who supports the governor's actions, and Democratic Representative Trey Martinez Fisher, who opposes them.
I don't know if the governor has figured it out yet, but President Trump has appointed a Homeland Security Secretary already, and maybe he should work with Governor Nome, who is now heading up those efforts. Look, Governor and I always have a lot of disagreements. There's one thing we do agree on. We both believe that the federal government should be reimbursing our state for the $11 billion we have spent on border security. But if the cavalry has come, if the federal authorities are going to handle this issue to the satisfaction of our governor, let's take our people's money and put it where it needs to be. I don't know about you, but in my part of the state, our schools could use some investments. I don't know about how things are in your part of the state, but we have insurance prices through the roof. And that is an area where the governor has a lot of authority and a lot of control to bring down those excessive premium rates. And rather than, try to play, military border czar, we ought to focus on folks' kitchen table issues.
I think it's excellent. I think it's this new day we have in government returning to common sense governing is fantastic. We have no idea what's going to happen 4 years from now. If you recall, President Trump signed over 200 executive orders in just a few hours after being sworn in. There is no reason to believe that if the things were to reverse and a Democrat was get elected next time, that they wouldn't immediately sign executive orders to go back to the insane policies that the Biden administration had.
The legislature has proposed the state spend an additional $6.5 billion on border security during the next 2 years. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick says a bill will pass this week that will give tax dollars to students who attend private school. Why he says it won't hurt public schools when Eye on Politics returns. Welcome back to Eye on Politics. Late this afternoon, Governor Greg Abbott is set to deliver his State of the State address. He'll outline his top legislative priorities or emergency items for this legislative session. Lawmakers will be able to immediately work on bills related to those emergency items instead of waiting for 60 days in the session as required by the Texas Constitution. One of these items will undoubtedly be taxpayer-funded education savings accounts in which students receive money from the state to attend private school. During our interview, the lieutenant governor pushed back against Democrats who've called the program a voucher scam.
There's no way that we're undermining public education.
Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick insisted the $1 billion school choice bill won't take away funding for public schools. It comes from general funds, which he said includes some money from the budget surplus. The legislation would allow about 35,000 students statewide to attend private school. But Patrick said people should keep in mind that the state still pays nearly $40 billion to educate its 5.5 million public school students.
And we didn't take this money out of the education fund. It's a new fund that we created. So it didn't come away from public education. We're fully funding public education.
Under the bill, 80% of the available positions would be filled by students who previously attend public school and are from lower income families or have a disability. All students would be eligible to fill the remaining 20%. Each student would receive at least $2,000, but as much as $10,000 per year if the student is in an accredited private school. Students with disabilities would receive up to $11,500 per year.
Okay, the Senate Committee on Education.
The proposal prompted state senators to ask questions during a hearing Tuesday.
So all hardships are equal, that's what you're saying?
We try to make sure we respect everyone's challenges as they approach us, yes, with great respect.
And so you're putting bullying on the same, I guess you could say equal platform as low-income schools. Someone coming from low academically.
Well, I mean, I personally know families who've lost a child to suicide because of bullying. And so
that hearing attracted everyday Texans on both sides of the issue.
As I saw my son marginalized, abused, bullied, and largely ignored in the wake of a school system that was overwhelmed and ill-equipped to educate a child with an autism diagnosis.
Diverting funds from public schools without ensuring quality standards in private schools risks draining resources when we are already underfunded.
So every time there's something to compete with public education, oh, the sky's falling, it's terrible. No, this is crazy. We have more kids in public school and more funding for public schools than most states have people.
The lieutenant governor said the Texas Senate passed similar bills 2 years ago and will do so again within the week.
And we're going to pass it off the floor next Wednesday, and we're going to send it over there like a rocket ship next week.
From the Senate, the bill will go to the Texas House, which killed it 2 years ago. While funding for this program comes from general revenues, school districts have opposed it because if they lose students to private schools, they will lose state funding tied to those students. And the districts have pointed out the state hasn't increased the basic allotment for school districts since 2019. President Trump issued an executive order freeing up federal money for school choice. Sarah Jenkins dug into what that could mean for North Texas school districts in this week's brief.
The U.S. Department of Education has been directed to prioritize school choice programs through grants and to issue guidance to states on how much money to allocate to districts and schools. The president's order also directs the Department of Health and Human Services to guide states receiving grants to support private and faith-based schools. Under the order, the Departments of Defense and Interior would be required to submit plans on how military families and American Indian and Alaska Native families can use funds to pick schools. It's not clear, though, how much the White House can do without Congress, or if any pause on federal assistance would impact grant programs. This comes as the National Assembly of Education progress for 2024 shows that 40% of fourth graders do not meet basic reading levels, the highest percentage ever recorded. And in Texas, 43% of fourth graders and 39% of eighth graders did not meet basic reading levels.
Thank you, Sarah. Coming up, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick explains why his plan to cut school property taxes again will save you more money when Eye on Politics comes right back. The Texas House and Senate have proposed giving homeowners an additional cut on their school property taxes. We asked the Lieutenant Governor about this, plus the sharp rise in homeowners and car insurance and potential changes to clarify the state's abortion law. But regarding the property tax relief issue, I asked him if we're going to see another fight between the House and Senate like we did 2 years ago.
Well, it shouldn't be, because for every billion, see, I don't want to go deep in the weeds here, but compression is a term. People say, what's compression? It's just lowering your school tax rate. For every $1 billion, Jack, of compression, that we spend to lower the tax rate, a homeowner gets $29 savings. Every billion of the homestead exemption, they get $110 savings. So if you're going to spend $3 billion, say, this session on more property tax relief, you will get $330 for the homestead exemption, and you will get $90, 3 times 29, $87. So if I'm going to spend $3 billion in property tax relief, I want to give homeowners $330 and not $87. It makes no sense. The difference also is homestead exemption is in the Constitution. Remember, the people voted for it.
Right.
That means it can never be taken away. But compression, it's just a statute. It's not in the Constitution. So all this compression that the House has wanted to pass over all these years, it can all be taken back one day. First time you have a downturn. People always ask this question about appraisals. Appraisals, 99% of the people out there, they don't matter anymore because we cap school funding at 2.5%, the local, and we cap cities and counties at 3.5%. So we're making up the difference. So because of that, when you get your appraisal bill in the spring, don't worry about that. Look at your tax bill. And if everyone watching will go back last year, look at their appraisal bill and their tax bill, and everyone's different, you will see that your school taxes over the last couple of years have gone down 41% across the board for everybody.
So why do we still hear people saying their taxes still went up, even with that?
So one of the things we have to address, some counties and some school districts will look for a waiver to increase their taxes, mostly the county taxes. So look, we're focused on school taxes, which are 60% of your bill. So we've cut school taxes by 41%. But I can't control each county, but we're going to work on that this session. We have a cap of 3.5%. They can't grow, but they've been using any excuse they can to go around that cap.
I want to ask you about something that a lot of people are talking about, and that is the cost of insuring a home and cars. They've gone through the roof, as you know. What can the state do about this without necessarily chasing insurers away from the state like we've seen in other states?
Jack, it's a real difficult problem. I know my own home. I had a hard time finding someone to insure my own home, and the costs have gone through the roof. Part of it is, we've had year after year after year, about 5 years of some natural disasters. And, in California, before those fires, you hear all these stories with insurance companies, terminating their policies.
Right.
And they're really, in a terrible situation. If we overplay our hand as a state, these are all private companies. They can just say, okay, we're pulling out of the state, and then we don't have any home insurance. So you got to get a balance here that we have to keep them, but we've also got to hold them accountable for the rates. And we do have an insurance commission that looks at the rates. But no, it is between your homeowner's insurance, your car insurance that you mentioned, your utility bill, and then for those who live in mud districts, if they have a mud bill or a water bill, it's expensive. And we're looking at what can we do to get insurance rates down because they are crippling.
I also want to ask you about abortion. You said a couple of weeks ago that lawmakers may need to make the law more certain for doctors. What do you have in mind?
I'm letting Brian Hughes work through that language, but I do know that he felt that there was some gray area. Look, we're a pro-life state, but we don't want any doctor feeling like if they're trying to save the life of a mother that they don't do it because they're afraid or they're going to violate some law and go to jail. So we need to just make that really clear. It's very few cases. During a political season, you see all these ads and all this stuff. It's very, very rare, actually, where, it's like a few cases, maybe a month in the whole state where a life is in danger, at least the last statistics that I saw. So we need to protect those women who are in a dangerous life situation, and the doctors need to be able to do what they should do.
There were reports that 3 women died.
Yeah, I can't verify them, and I don't know what the details were. But nothing has come to my desk that's been proven. It doesn't mean it didn't happen, but we want to be sure that doesn't happen.
Affordable housing is something
it's going to be a priority bill of mine.
What can the state really do to create an atmosphere that's going to lower the cost of housing?
Well, one of the things you can do is on lot size. So some cities require you to have a certain size lot. Well, when you buy a house or build a house, a big part of the cost is the dirt, it's the land. Other cities do not have that restriction. And we have some counties that have those restrictions. So we believe that you should not set your lot size as so big that it makes, you got to build a $700,000 house on it or $800,000 house. Smaller lot sizes, smaller homes to make them more affordable.
You're talking about basically telling cities and counties that you cannot have those restrictions.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're working on. But I haven't seen the final bill language, still in a draft. But there's a package of bills we're looking at. There's 4 or 5 things we can do to make housing more affordable.
And you can watch the full interview with Dan Patrick and other lawmakers on our YouTube channel. Just search for CBS News Texas, like, and then subscribe to the channel. And that's all for Eye on Politics this week. I'm Jack Fink. I am listening, and we are listening to you at CBS News Texas. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next week. And from all of us here, have a great Sunday.